Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I am the head coach at Grace Financial Coaching. And I am so excited to have Leah Adams with me today. Leah is a financial coach and author who loves helping people move from frustration and anxiety to freedom and peace in their finances. Leah's practice is appropriately named Breathe Financial Coaching because Leah helps her clients do just that. She guides them in a way as to allow them to breathe in their finances, possibly for the first time or at least in a very long time. Leah is a retired pharmacist, and the best part about that is that she is retired. How are you, Leah?
I'm doing well, Suzanne. How are you?
Good. So how did we go from pharmacy to financial coaching?
Well, I knew I was retiring, and I knew I didn't want to sit at home and watch television all day. So I just began to look for an encore career. And the first thing I did was get a life coaching certification, and then felt like I wanted something in addition to that because it's very difficult to build a life coaching practice. And so I was riding down the road one day, and there was this commercial on the radio for Dave Ramsey's financial coach master training, and began to pray about it, and the rest is history. Here I am.
Wow. So right off the bat, the thing that strikes me is having grown up in New York and then living in California for several years, Dave Ramsey's not on the radio. Nowhere. In California, in San Diego, he was on air at, I'm not kidding you, 9:00 on a Sunday night for 1 hour. And it was obviously a replay of one show the previous week.
Right.
So it's always so interesting to me when I drove cross country, I would see billboards of Dave Ramsey. But unfortunately, for a lot of people in larger cities, they just don't give him the love that he deserves.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So very interesting to me that you would hear about that on the radio. So were you familiar with Dave Ramsey prior to hearing that advertisement?
I was peripherally familiar. I was not, I was listening to the show, but I was not actively involved in anything.
Gotcha. So how long, when did you start listening? Was it just, oh, I'm driving in the car and this guy happens to be on the radio kind of thing?
Yes, that was it. I had about a 45-minute drive to and from the pharmacy where I worked. And so, I would listen to different shows on the radio, and I tuned in one day and I thought, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Either that or he was yelling at somebody and you found it humorous, right? I love those days where you can just tell, like, oh, Dave's in a mood today.
That's right.
No one's getting yelled at. So you did the life coaching thing and then heard the ad on the radio?
Correct.
Okay. So what drew you to adding financial coaching to your practice? Because it doesn't sound like you were a big Dave Ramsey, diehard or anything like that.
No. And the joke with me was I was never great with numbers. I'm a pharmacist. All I have to do is count to 5 for tablets, 5, 10, 15, 20. So that was the joke. I don't do numbers, but I just really, I knew how my husband and I had done some dumb things with finances, which is what we're talking about today, and how we got out of them, and that there was freedom in that. And I just thought, if this is where God is leading me to serve and to use as an encore career, then why not?
Yeah. So let's go back to your financial coaching practice. Who, based on your experience, based on your training, who do you specifically help, and what are we helping them do?
Well, over the course of my 2.5 years of coaching, I have worked with individuals and with couples. I've worked with people as young as their early 20s. And my first client was a darling 75-year-old widow. So I've worked with all ages. I've worked with all stages, but I really, really love working with single women, either never married, widowed, or divorced. I just love that group of people.
Okay. And what are some of the goals that all, single, never married, divorced, or widowed? What are some of the goals that whole population has, no matter whatever silo they fall into?
Security. As women in general, we are wired where our primary need is to feel safe and secure.
Yeah.
And when you are a single woman, and I was a single woman at one point, I was 6 years single before my husband and I got married. And if you are a single woman, and I'm sure it's true for single men as well, but especially for single women, you want to feel like you can take care of yourself, that you have enough money to do what you need to do, and also just to to make it to the end, whenever
Mm.
that is. And so I just love helping single women find that security. Now, ultimately, our security is in Jesus, and I know that.
Mm-hmm.
But money is such a huge part, and God speaks to the issue of money in Scripture, so we have to deal with it. It
Yeah,
touches every
absolutely.
area of our life.
I know it cracks me up when I'm talking to somebody. Usually it's in a consultation and they're like, so, maybe it's a couple, maybe it's one person, and they're kind of, maybe they've been referred to me, but they look at me and they go, so what exactly are you going to help me do? And it's so difficult to not just say everything.
Right.
Because then I'll specifically say, well, your friend so and so who referred me, they told you about all the debt that they've paid off, and that's one of the things I do. But then maybe they didn't tell you about how much they grew their savings account, blah blah. And so we can talk about these like logistical things that we do, but really, instead of answering everything, the answer is security.
Mhm.
Is I provide you with a process and a way to get from insecure to secure, financially speaking.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
what specifically, let's give us we don't have to give any names, but example of a client that came to you and maybe was kind of hopeless. I mean, we see that a lot, doesn't matter what population. And how did you get them from that hopeless stage to the security and to achieving financial success and goals?
Undoubtedly, it was that first client that I had, that 75-year-old widow. When she found me on Facebook and through some other people, and our first session together, she was in kind of a darkened room. She had this very downcast look on her face, very sad.
Mm.
She wouldn't really meet my eye. And she shared with me that never in her adult life, and remember, she's 75 years old, never in her adult life had she been without credit card debt, multiple credit cards, because she was putting money on a credit card that had 0% interest for a year, and riding that horse until the interest kicked in, and then moving the money to another credit card. So she had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 credit cards, as I
Oh,
recall.
oh my gosh.
And she was just hopeless,
Yeah.
absolutely hopeless that she would not die in that situation.
Yeah,
And she was
20 credit cards,
living,
that's enough to I mean, you could be 50 and still think that if you had
uh,
20 credit cards.
yeah, she was living on debt and had no idea how to get out of it.
Yeah.
And
So,
she was my first client, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, can I even help you?" Not that I didn't think she was able to be helped, but did I have the resources?
right, were you a good enough coach to help her through this situation? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. So where did we start?
We started budgeting,
Just with budgeting, right?
with budgeting, and it was literally pen and paper.
Oh, yeah.
Budgeting. I
Mhm.
taught her how to budget. She would, prior to each session, because she lived about 2 hours away from me, prior to each session, she would photocopy her budget and mail it to me.
My God.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, that is so
Hmm.
cute.
I know. And we worked on budgeting. We worked on getting cards closed, because there were cards that she had that hadn't been used in years, but that were
Right.
still open. So we
Mhm.
worked on getting them closed. We worked on moving things that were automatically going to the card into a more of a cash situation or a
Right,
debit
right.
card
Or a debit,
situation.
right. Use it, putting the
Mhm.
typing the debit card into pay the water bill instead of having it on the credit card. Right.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. How much does your life coaching come into play when you're working with clients who are coming to you for financial coaching?
Tons,
Yeah.
tons, because money touches every area of our life, and anxiety, stress, lack of boundaries. Those are all things I learned how to deal with through life coaching. And so it really touches every area of my financial coaching. I can't think of any client I've ever had that I didn't use some of my life coaching training.
Right. And a lot of us financial coaches find ourselves turning into life coaches sometimes, or turning into makeshift therapists,
Absolutely, we
depending
do.
on what is going on behind the scenes for sure.
Yes.
So Leah, I created this show to help people realize we all make financial mistakes, but hopefully we can learn initially from the experience of others. So Leah, what is the dumbest thing you've ever done with money?
Oh, my word, Suzanne. This is something that I share with every person that I talk to who comes to me thinking that they want to hire a financial coach because they need to know that I've been where they are.
Yeah.
And so we live in a very small town. My husband and I live in the small town where we grew up, but we lived in Atlanta prior to that. And so we had property here in our town when we decided to move back. My dad was a builder. And so when we decided to move back, my dad started building our home here. We took out a construction loan for a home that ultimately became a home loan. At the same time, my husband is a dentist. He's now a retired dentist. But we took out a loan to equip his dental practice.
Oh.
Now, dental practices are ridiculously expensive to equip. I mean, you probably wouldn't even believe it if I told you how much that chair that
Oh,
you sit in when you go to the dentist cost in 1999. It was absurd. So we took out a loan to equip his practice. So here we are with a home loan and a dental practice loan. Well, my sister had property that joined the property that we had here. So in about 2006 or so, she decided that she and her husband lived on a different end of the county and she was not going to need her property.
mm,
So she decided that she was going to sell the property. And that was 2006, the height of the real estate market prior to what we have just gone through.
right.
So we decided that we would buy her property because we didn't want anybody else to come in and build
That is
on
so
that.
something my husband and I would do too.
Yeah. So that gave us 20 acres
Okay.
here where we live. So we took out a loan to do that.
Oh,
That was 10 acres at about $30,000 an acre. So you can do the math and know that
mhm.
we had another pretty big loan.
Yeah.
On that property was a basement, a finished basement, but had never been built up to
Oh,
become a
okay.
full house. So we got this brilliant idea that we would finish the house and sell it as a spec house
Oh my
in
gosh.
2007.
Oh my gosh.
You know where this is going, right? Anyone that was alive at that time knows that 2008, the market tanked.
Yeah.
And the area where we live is a popular area for retirees, and construction and building is huge here.
Okay.
So now we have a home loan, a practice loan, a land loan, and a construction loan. Yeah. The market tanks.
Yes.
It takes us until 2009 to sell that spec house.
Oh,
So for a solid 2 years, we have all of those loans that we're servicing at $10,000 a month total.
oh my word. $10,000 a month.
Yes. Now, my husband loves to say, and he's so right, He's so wise and he's so right that God gave us enough ointment to cover the wound. We never missed a payment.
Wow.
We were never late. We always had the money to make the payments. But I can distinctly remember standing on the front porch of that spec house saying, never again. Never again will we be in this kind of a shape.
What was the stress level like for those 2.5 years?
Unbelievable. Here's
Yeah.
a type A, and I'm the bill payer. It was unbelievable. Now, in 2009, we sold the house. We sold the spec house. And when you sell a home or sell anything, you go to closing and you come back with a check, right? Wrong. We took a check for over $100,000 to get rid of that spec house. And so this is the situation that we were in. And I'd never heard of Dave Ramsey. I'd never heard of the baby steps or the debt snowball, but I knew we had to do something different than we were doing to get rid of that debt. So I began extra money. I began throwing at those loans. Now, I didn't do it systematically like the debt
Okay.
snowball says, but I just began throwing extra money at those loans. And so it wasn't long before we got one of them paid off. And then a few years later, we got another one paid off, and then another one. And then I think it was 2016 that we finally paid the last one off. We paid our home off in
Oh,
2016.
the home you're sitting in.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. That's amazing.
It truly is amazing.
Yeah.
And Greg and I look at each other and we just say, if we had known how good it feels to be 100% debt free, we would have worked harder to get here faster.
Yeah.
And
I had
so-
a conversation with someone the other night. They said, and I think they know what I do now that I'm looking back at the conversation. And they said, well, we only have good loans. We have the mortgage and we have our cars. And I didn't want to be confrontational, but I said something to the effect of, well, your home should appreciate most of the time, right? 95% of the time that I've been alive, homes have been appreciating. I said, but your car is not technically a good loan. The car is going down in value unless you bought a 1968 Corvette and didn't tell me, that car's going down in value.
Right. Or a pickup truck.
Oh my gosh. Right now, don't even get me started. I had to put a few $1,000s into our truck recently, but the only other option was to go buy one for double the price than the thing's really worth. So that's a whole other story. We'll talk about that another time. But
right.
But it's the idea, and basically the moral of the story of what I said to her was, well, cars aren't that great. Technically, the bank still owns your car. Wasn't going to get into the argument about the mortgage, but I'm like, technically, you don't own the car. The bank has the title. And she sat for a second. She's like, oh yeah, you're right. And now that also translates to her house because she has a mortgage. But mortgage debt is different in the sense, like I just said, that your home should normally be appreciating throughout the ownership of the home, or it's kind of a misnomer. You don't own it yet. Right. The bank still owns it. So Leah, you own your home. So what is the difference now?
The difference is amazing. I mean, I don't have to write that check every month.
There's one difference.
Huge difference. And the money that we were using to pay the mortgage is now our money. I'm not sending it to the bank so they can build bigger buildings. I'm keeping it for us. And that allows us to be more generous. Yes.
I certainly hope you take a vacation or two for yourselves.
We do.
That's excellent. Yeah, it is not having to write that mortgage check. That can only mean anybody who's watching and listening right now, what would that mean? Like not writing that mortgage check. And having grown up in New York, mortgages are $3,000-$4,000 a month. Yeah. And so what would it look like to open up $3,000 or $4,000? in your budget. What would it look like to open up $1,500 in your budget if you live in an area where
Right.
that's more of the mortgage, the going rate? And it's the possibilities are endless.
They really are.
Mm-hmm. What have you guys found yourself doing since 2016, since you wrote that last check?
Well, we do travel a little bit. My husband, around that time, maybe a little bit before that, got his private pilot's license. So we own part of an airplane, which is, it's a luxury, but it's a nice little treat to be able to do that. We give. We have grandchildren, so that's part of it. We go to see the grandchildren some. So we're just more generous, I think.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is you do whatever you want with it.
Add anything I want. That's right.
That is so amazing. Right. And the goal of paying those, looking back, right? Let's take a step back and put yourself in that situation where you sat down and said, I need to get rid of these faster. What was the motivation back then when it finally clicked and you said, let me put an extra 200 on this one. Let me put an extra 100 on this one. Let me put an extra 50 on this one. What was kind of going through your mind?
It's just so that I could breathe again. Because with all of that debt owed every month, even though we had the money and we weren't at risk of losing anything, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be done with that stress. Life is stressful enough, and to heap that kind of stress on yourself just adds to it. And so I just wanted to be done with that stress.
Yeah, definitely. Chris, good morning. A life well earned. Yes, it is indeed. Indeed. And that's why we encourage our clients, right, Leah, to buckle down now. Yes. Buckle down now and get it over with. And as Dave likes to say, sometimes suck it up, buttercup, and and make those cuts and make those sacrifices. Do we want you to not have a life? No, I think that's a misnomer about financial coaching, right? We're not going to have you live on bread and water. You are still going to be able to eat some protein.
And dessert.
And dessert, right? Exactly. I have dessert in my fridge right now. But it's going to make the rest of your time here on Earth so much more breathable, manageable, less stressful, all of those things that you said.
That's right.
Yeah. So Leah, if you could go back in time, what would you change about that whole stressful $10,000 a month situation?
Probably would not have bought that property.
Okay.
From
the sister's property.
My family.
Property. Right. Okay.
And if we didn't have the property, we wouldn't have built the spec house.
So we wouldn't have had two of those loans then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Definitely. Now, are we saying that because we now have the hindsight of knowing the market was going to crash at the end of 2007, 2008?
Probably.
Right. But you said, you never know what's going to happen.
No, you don't. I mean, no one. My father was in real estate, and he always said to me, you will never go wrong with real estate. But he had never seen an economy like we had in 2008.
Yeah. I remember in the field that I was working in at the time, we started to see it at the end of 2007. And I remember speaking to my supervisor, my manager at the time, and saying, these numbers that we're putting up on this particular team that I was working on, this isn't going to happen next year. And she looked at me like I had four heads. You don't know. You haven't been in this business long enough. And sure enough, 2008 was a disaster. And I just could see it in what the numbers my teammates were putting up. November and December of 2007, everything started to slow down. And it was the precursor. Yeah. But never in a million years could I have sat there and said, oh, the entire real estate market's going to collapse.
Right. It was just such a sad time. I mean, in our local paper, there's usually 2 or 3 foreclosures. This was pages of foreclosure notices.
Oh my gosh, I know.
And in my worst nightmare, our name was there.
Right. Oh my gosh, that is what a powerful negative motivator to have sitting in front of you. Oh my goodness. Laura really sums it up. A little discomfort now equals easiness later. Yes,
That's right.
definitely. Totally. Leah, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone learned something from Leah today and will join us next week for another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. Make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leah, thank you again so much.
Thank you for having me, Suzanne.